Well,
Yeah.
and I think, Doug, going back to our conversation, I remember at Missio Nexus, and that'll lead into our next question about the theory of change. But asking the question of, if you're just a humanitarian group, your focus. Okay, you talked about the objective numbers, like how many hours flown, how many pounds of cargo have we hauled. But in the ministry world, that doesn't translate to success. And so, how do we make sure that it's very easy to go after more tangible, objective numbers things, because those are
We like numbers.
we like numbers. We like something that we can say that these are our results.
Sure.
But
The ROI,
the return on investment,
yeah.
and in a ministry, results may not be. We have a bigger goal, a bigger mission and purpose, and so
Absolutely.
how do we, kind of the questions you were asking, how do we make sure that those miles flown end up accomplishing the Great Commission of discipling people in these countries where we're flying aircraft? Because the goal is not just to
Right.
fly as many hours as possible or haul as much cargo as possible. Is that
Right.
translating into Great Commission, achievement?
Right. And we'll call that kingdom ROI.
Okay,
right?
kingdom ROI. I
So
like that.
we can do that.
KROI. I
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
fine. That's
good.
fine.
That's good.
So yeah, well, like many mission agencies that were born out of the middle of the 20th century, there's a curious thing going on within MAF, and I'm sure many others. I'm well networked to hear the same sort of stories. Is that God is preserving us, even though the initial value we brought to the Great Commission isn't the same, in the sense that after World War II, the idea there was, I wasn't alive, of course, even though I am a graybeard. There was a lot of specialization in North American culture, and part of the way this specialization impacted the sending aspects of the North American churches. In our instance, we'll fly the planes, you plant the church, right? So we'll just keep this sort of specialization going, and then all through the 1990s, as that great generation that went out, post World War II to propel the gospel to the remote part of the earth. Western missionaries began to decline, globalization began to increase, urbanization began to increase, and if we were operating in sort of a normal commercial environment, we would have expected to see MAF's request for services decline. But instead, we're having more and more requests for service than ever before. But what has diminished is the traditional payload, if you will, or the passengers that were the Western missionary. More and more now, it's national pastors that are accepting the national church has matured greatly in the last 50 years in most places around the world, not all. And there's the local pastors are saying, how could MAF potentially work together to help us achieve the passions we have for reaching our people and bringing about gospel awareness in the Great Commission? And so it's caused MAF to have to shift its weight from maybe one foot to the other foot. We're still standing, but maybe what we used to stand on isn't as relevant today as what we feel God inviting us into the future. And we've used a tool called the theory of change, which is a kind of an awkward academic name, but we've used a tool called the theory of change to help us calibrate whether we're delivering the kingdom ROI that we believe we're called to in our articles of incorporation. So.
Well, go ahead and explain what this theory of change
Sure.
is.
Yeah, sorry
Sure.
for the listener. They won't get to see the map of these. It's
right.
pretty
Well,
sophisticated, but
right. So the theory of change, when I first heard about it, I thought this was a theory written by the World Bank or the United Nations or some think tank somewhere, and we had to go read it, decide if we agree with it or not. What is this theory of change? But actually, if you just Google theory of change, and you can go to theoryofchange.org, which is a nonprofit designed to promote the use and integration of the theory of change into nonprofits. A theory of change is simply a collection of 8 or 9 questions that are arranged in a specific order that helps a nonprofit say, what is your long-term impact? What are your short-term outcomes? What are the assumptions you have that you believe that achieving your short-term outcomes will eventually result in the long-term impact, as well as then breaking down a lot of tasks and to-dos and what they call outputs. John, you mentioned, how easy it has been for us for years and years within MAF to look at our passenger miles and cargo tons, takeoff and landings that are all outputs. And when we were predominantly flying Western missionaries, people had no trouble in their minds saying, well, more activity equals more gospel. But lo and behold, with the tapering and the reduction of the traditional number of Western missionaries that MAF was accustomed to flying, we had to shift that balance from one foot to the other, saying, okay, outputs are still important for stewardship and efficiency and understanding what we're doing. But how we do what we do is going to be measured in outcomes. And those outcomes are all gospel-centric, and they have nothing at all to do with the hardware, the platform per se. So, briefly, if you're going to tell a story using the theory of change, you'd start with your challenge. And none of these 8 questions are rocket science. They're not questions that I thought, as I started reading about the theory of change, I thought I was going to get the secret questions, But actually, they're just normal questions that, when arranged in a certain order, help you see things with greater clarity and understanding where your leverage is and where your challenges are. So it's a theory of change questions briefly starts with the challenge. What is the problem you're attempting to address? And we, as a Christian evangelical organization, we understand that the root issue, besides many important surface issues, is people's relationship with God. The second grouping of questions is, do you really know your beneficiaries? To what degree do the beneficiaries inform your direction in what you're doing and why you're doing it? It's very easy in the West for us to take our vast amounts of capital and credentials and create solutions that are just completely inappropriate for a recipient community. So the theory of change says, tell us about your beneficiaries and what's really going on there. Who are the other stakeholders that are involved? So little happens today solo in this world. Partnerships, joint ventures, collaboration is just key, especially when it comes to moving the needle in society, if you will, right? We're not building hard products. We're trying to bring a blessing and an awareness to a recipient community, and that really needs to be done through a submission to the local church if it's there, and not come in with our heavy-handedness that is well-intended but often not helpful. Theory of change asks you about your assets and resources. That's just sort of an inventory. But again, that leads back into partnerships, because it's, what do I have in hand? And what does the other stakeholders have in hand? And how do we mutually serve one another? Eventually, then, you drop into the to-do list of tasks and activities that you trust will result in certain outputs. But then offshooting from the outputs are these outcomes. Outcomes are sort of the so what. We flew 1 million miles. So what? How do we know those are the right miles? Oh, we did 10,000 landings. So what? How do we know those are the right landings, if you will? So you describe your outcomes, and outcomes are generally understood as things that we can control. And I know by God's grace, there's the illusion of control, in this world. But I'm just saying, in terms of the way we communicate our objectives, the way we align our limited resources, the short-term outcomes are the things that we believe we can be accountable to. And then doing those short-term outcomes long enough, potent enough, frequently enough, we believe they create a condition for the long-term impact, which is new and maturing disciples of Jesus Christ. And clearly, without the Holy Spirit and God's hand involved in that, our short-term outcomes won't go very far. So we don't step into the realm that belongs to God, but we try to prepare the soil, plant the seed. We're fishing for the hearts and souls of people. And those are things that we believe we can be accountable to our stakeholders, our donors, and our partner community. So that's That's the theory of change in a nutshell. Is these 8 questions, and it's resulted in a lot of good here at MAF to block things out like that.
So, I mean, obviously, great questions to process through working in a nonprofit organization. And if somebody was interested, again, it's theoryofchange.org. They can find more information on that. Okay.
Yeah. That's not associated with MAF in any way, but it's a group that's committed to helping people use the tool of the theory of change in their own nonprofit endeavors.